Hey everyone, it's John Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on the Battle of Britain and the Blitz 1940 to 1941. So this is the next instalment for our World War II series. So we're going to look at some of the context and causes, what actually drove and caused the Battle of Britain and the Blitz in the first place. Then we'll move on to a really good chronology, which will really beef up your notes and give you the precise dates, the who, what and wheres. And then we'll look at a big turning point in this early part of World War II. And then we'll round off by looking at some of the impact and the significance of the Battle of Britain and the Blitz on the broader war as it kind of played out. Okay then people, so let's dive in. So first off then, the history just before these events, what was actually driving the Battle of Britain to happen and the Blitz in the first place? Well, first off then, I'll go here with a little video as well. We have strategic isolation and invasion plans. So let's just unpick that together. So by 1940, as we learnt in the last lesson, Germany was in the ascendancy. They'd pretty much conquered all of Europe, or all of Western Europe, to be honest. So following the fall of France in June 1940, Britain was the sole major European power now resisting Nazi Germany. That was it. Okay, so Germany, it looked on the surface like they'd won and they'd isolated Britain. That brought forth Operation Sea Lion, which was basically Hitler's plans for an amphibious cross-channel invasion of the UK. Very, very risky operation, which strictly required total air superiority over the English Channel. Otherwise, we'd have just blown the German boats out of the water. And you can see Operation Sea Lion here for visual learners. The operations kind of being planned by the Germans, and then the White Cliffs of Dover in the distance, okay, the invasion target. And we should never forget that the English Channel is only 20 miles kind of wide, so it's not that much of a distance from between Britain and the Nazis at this point, but nevertheless. Then we have shifts in aerial doctrine and technology. So we have Hugh Dowding there, who was the British Chief of Fighter Command. He was a very dour kind of man, and it kind of shows in that image, but he was very, very good at his job. So Britain developed an integrated air defence network linking almost in a chain of home radar stations, observer corps, and then Fighter Command, who were kind of carefully husbanding all of our fighter planes. And he integrated that into a kind of system under Hugh Dowding, and it worked. It really kind of came together during the Battle of Britain. Luftwaffe strength as well. So Hermann Göring commanded a battle-tested air fleet of Bf-109s, also known as Messerschmitts, HE-111 bombers, Heinkels, and Stuka dive bombers, which did outnumber the RAF. Okay, at this point, it wasn't as well led as probably the RAF in the Battle of Britain, but nevertheless, it had formidable strength, and it was fresh from, well, fairly fresh from the victory over France. Then we have war aims and political will. I love that picture of Winston Churchill there. So Churchill rallied the empire with his finest hours speech. It's one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. You can find it on YouTube and on the internet. Rejecting any negotiated peace with Nazi Germany. Literally, we're going to go down fighting. That's it. He even said, we will fight them with broken beer bottles if we need to. So this guy was not giving up. Okay, Churchill's defiance was total. And the German objective, the Luftwaffe aimed to destroy RAF Fighter Command in the air via dogfights, and then obliterate the airfields across southern England, because if they obliterated RAF airfields, then they can't land and they can't kind of launch into the air. They would find it very, very difficult. So that was the kind of German objective going into this part of the war. So those are the kind of the contextual issues behind the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. So let's now have a nice look at the chronology, and then we'll look at a nice turning point throughout this part of the conflict. So first off then, July to August 1940, we have channel battles and also airfield assaults by the Luftwaffe. And a great image there of a Messerschmitt chasing down a Spitfire there. So we have the Kanalkampf in July then. So the Luftwaffe attacks British shipping convoys and the south coast ports to draw the RAF fighters into open air combat. They knew that if we strike Britain's ports like Dover and places like that, the RAF will have to come out and fight us because they can't just have the southern ports be decimated. So that was the kind of opening gambit strategically. Eagle Day, known as Adlertag in German, 13th of August, Germany launched massive air raids targeting the RAF's radar stations because radar was crucial to kind of preempting when the Germans were attacking. Command bunkers and Sector 11 airfields. Okay, so they're attacking very strategic areas, very intelligent actually. That's exactly what they probably should have been doing at this point. And the attrition on fighter command then, so RAF 11 group suffers severe aircraft losses, pilot exhaustion because they're having to come back, refuel and then go straight back up without much rest. And it placed Britain's air defences on the brink of collapse. So they kind of had us, to be honest. They kind of they were very close to kind of forcing RAF fighter command to break, okay, at the early point. However, things do change. So 7th of September 1940, the shift towards London. So there was a Berlin raid retaliation. So following a retaliatory RAF bombing raid on Berlin, which absolutely drove Hitler nuts, he ordered the Luftwaffe to switch focus then from the airfields to London. And that was a core strategic mistake on Hitler's part. So now he wanted to bomb London, which it would have certain it would kind of terrify British civilians, but strategically there wasn't much point because you've got the RAF on the ropes. You need to knock out the rest of the airfields and stop them from launching. But he didn't, and he switched to London, which was luckily for us. So that gave fighter command respite, so they diverted the attacks away from sector airfields, and that allowed us to repair the runways and rearm critical reserves and critically get more pilots, a trickle of pilots kind of into the fight and develop more fighter planes or make more fighter planes. Black Sunday was 7th of September, so over 300 German bombers escorted by 600 fighters, that's a big raid, bombed London's East End and docks, and it ignited massive fires. That was a real, you can see in the image there, that's kind of what it was like. It was pretty tough, to be honest, on Black Saturday. Then we have on the 15th of September 1940, kind of what you may call Battle of Britain Day, I suppose. So mass daylight raid. The Luftwaffe launched an all-out 1,500 aircraft daylight assault intended to crush remaining air power over London, because they thought, we'll bomb London to smithereens, but also we'll draw out the last of the RAF's fighter reserves. However, it was an RAF victory. Fighter command intercepted waves with unmatched tactical coordination via the Dowding System, shooting down nearly 60 German aircraft with manageable losses. And losing 60 aircraft in a day doesn't sound that much, but it kind of is in these operational terms. But more importantly, if you lose the pilots, because a pilot can take hundreds of hours of training time, and the Germans could not afford to lose that degree of trained Luftwaffe pilots. And then Operation Sea Lion, the invasion to attack the UK, was formally postponed on the 17th of September. So realising that air superiority could not be won, Hitler then postpones Sea Lion indefinitely and just says, look, it's too risky and we're going to look elsewhere, okay, for easier prizes to conquer. So that brings us to the final part of the chronology, September 1940 to May 1941, the night blitz. So 57 consecutive nights London was bombed from the 7th of September to the 2nd of November 1940 to try and shatter civilian morale. Okay, and a very famous image there of St Paul's Cathedral through the blitz. A destruction of industrial hubs, so they also targeted Coventry, on the 14th of November 1940, my home city of Birmingham, Liverpool and the Glasgow docks as well. They were really hitting us quite hard here. However, by May 1941 was the kind of what historians deemed to be the end of the Blitz. The Luftwaffe halted mass raids over Britain so they could redeploy the majority of their air fleets, or Luftlotte, east for Operation Barbarossa. They needed those bombers now to attack the Soviet Union very, very soon. So the Blitz formally comes to an end. Now, in terms of, as we know, those are the key events in this period of the war, but obviously turning points are very important for us history students. So do I think it was the turning point during this? Well, I think the development of the Dowding System and the shift towards London was a major strategic error on Hitler's part. So technological integration. Early warning radar was massive, and it allowed fighter command to scramble interceptors precisely where they were needed and neutralise Germany's numerical advantage. And you can kind of see for visual learners here a little bit, picking up the radar, sending the Spitfires out, and we could intercept them before they kind of came over the English Channel. That was absolutely invaluable because the Germans did not have radar in this period, but we did. So it gave us the real technological edge during the Battle of Britain. And the strategic pivot, as I said, Hitler's decision to bomb London instead of airfields, which we were right on the edge of being defeated there. But then the switch then to the Blitz and to bomb London instead saved RAF Fighter Command from operational collapse. Okay, so I do think that was a big turning point, and thankfully one of Hitler's biggest mistakes. Okay, so what was the impact of the Battle of Britain and the Blitz on London? And as we know, we normally try and break down tertiary, which were not quite as significant, secondary significance, which were obviously bit more important, and then primary significance, which are the most important in my mind, of course. We can always debate this because it's history, and that's a lovely part of the subject, isn't it? So the tertiary significant events of the Battle of Britain and the Blitz, for me, American alignment and the global strategic pivot. So US confidence and Lend-Lease. So British survival of the Blitz and the Battle of Britain convinced President Roosevelt in America that Britain could actually hold out. Because the American senator, Joseph Kennedy, who was the father of the future President John F. Kennedy, he was actually feeding Roosevelt that the British were finished. He said they'll die in this battle. Okay, and Hitler will win. So Roosevelt was receiving that information, but after the Battle of Britain, we came out of it stronger, and Roosevelt was thinking, well, yeah, maybe Britain can turn this round. So it led directly to the Lend-Lease policy in March 1941, where basically the Americans would lend us military arms, including 50 destroyers, which was crucial to getting food across the Atlantic, in return for hard cash payments, as the Americans normally ask for. But it kept us just in the fight. Also, it turned Hitler's attention, as you can see in the image, with General von Manstein there. He's finest general of World War II. It turned his focus eastward. He knew that he couldn't defeat Britain now, so he shifted his primary strategic focus now towards the ideological conquest of the Soviet Union. Okay, if I can't defeat Britain, I'll defeat Russia, and then I'll come back for you. That was basically the grand strategy now. Then we have secondary significance, a beautiful submarine Spitfire there. Really is one of the most beautiful aircraft ever made. Secondary significance is, the evolution of aerial warfare and the home front mobilisation. So it was the triumph of integrated air defence, as we've learnt today. It validated the combined use of radar, sector commands, and then decentralised production of fighters for modern air defence. We got it right. Britain got it right during the Battle of Britain, and we combined everything into the air into an integrated system. So that was very, very an operational kind of progression. And also it showed civilian resilience. The Blitz failed to break civilian morale. Okay, as Churchill famously said in the period, we can take it. And they could. It was hard. The Londoners got bombed out, but nevertheless they didn't crack. Factory productivity remained high, and British society fully mobilised now for total war. Okay, we were really ramped up and ready to go. We rolled up our sleeves here. But what was the primary significance? Well, you can debate it, but in our minds, I think this was what the primary significance was. I think it was the first major strategic defeat for Nazi Germany, and I think that was important. You can see it kind of halted Blitzkrieg, and you can see the kind of German soldiers there looking rather annoyed as they kind of just look over the channel, but we stopped them, and I think that was very, very important, halting the Blitzkrieg conquests. So it denied Hitler total victory in the West, prevented the invasion of Britain, and proved, very importantly, morally, the German war machine was beatable. They're not these Aryan supermen that they kind of said they were, and they could be defeated, thankfully. And it created, in what we call in strategic studies, Britain became an unsinkable aircraft carrier. So basically, you could not sink us, and Britain turns into a massive operational base now for future Allied strategic bombing of Germany from 1942 and 1943 onwards, and then eventually a launch pad for the D-Day landings. Okay, so Britain was that unsinkable aircraft carrier that kind of allowed us to then relaunch into into Western Europe eventually, and help to win the war alongside the Russians. So I think that's the kind of primary significance there. So you can see that was the Battle of Britain and the Blitz, and it was a real kind of operational success for the Brits and for the Allies. And hopefully that's given you a really good launch point now to beef up your notes on that part of the war. So don't forget to hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon to never miss another Let's Learn video again. Obviously keep your eyes peeled for our next video in the World War II series, of course. If you have any comments that you want to pop into the comments box, please do, and we'll respond on YouTube. And it just remains to say, hopefully you've had some fun there, a really important turning point in history. And yeah, it just remains to say thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Take care.